Hi everybody, this is Steve from entertainmentdemocracy.com. Just wanted to give you my first video about movies. We've done a lot on video games, but thought I would try my hand at some movie stuff. And no better topic than award season, in particular the Oscars. Every year the categories come out and there's this sense of excitement, and then there's this sense of great sadness as I see the categories that I love filled with stuff that I either really enjoyed or really hated. And as per every year, the awards are kind of filled with a bit of controversy, but also some confirmation. Confirmation in the sense that the films that I liked were chosen to be best pictures. That's always this little bit of an ego boost when something as prestigious as the Academy decides that the film that you liked was the film that is considered the best picture. I know it's arbitrary, but of course it still feels nice. Then there's that controversy. The films where you go, how the heck did that make it there? How the heck does the Academy think this is one of the greatest films of this year? Of course, like I said, every year it's a mixed bag. Some you win, some you lose, and in this case, it's both. So what I thought I'd do as our first video was literally that. Go down the list of best pictures and look at the things that I really liked and the things that I didn't like so much. Of course, I'll also be bold enough to declare who the winner of that best picture category will be, and maybe also the best director, just to put my thoughts out there. Not necessarily who deserved, but who will win that award. And then of course, as I start to strip away some of the rubbish, I'll put in some of my best picture picks that didn't make lists. Films that were overlooked because they weren't Academy types or didn't necessarily have enough money to kind of publicise how great they were. Hey, so with all the qualifications of a film enthusiast with a video camera and a YouTube account to upload it to, here I go breaking down the best pictures. Now the film that I easily think deserves to win the best picture of this category is the film Her by Spike Jonze. Now Spike Jonze has always been known for his quirky and crazy kind of films, such as, you know, Where the Wild Things Are or Being John Malkovich or things like that. But Her is probably the most quirky of them all on some level. But yet at the same time it's quite realistic. It's about a man, Theodore, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who falls in love with his operating system. Clearly it's not a Windows operating system because, you know, no one would ever fall in love with Windows 8. But here he falls in love with the voice of Scarlett Johansson, who is this wonderfully artificial, intelligent voice in his head. He's a lonely guy who falls in love with a machine, but it's perfectly believable because the dialogue and the screenplay is just so perfect, so on note that you would be convinced that there was a person in the room. At times it's heartbreaking, at times it's uplifting. It captures that whole falling in love thing without fault. It's a beautiful film. It deserves to win Best Oscar, but will probably win Best Screenplay. For those of you who have been keeping score at home, know that Best Screenplay is often the award that is given to the film that seems the most deserving, but seems the most un-Oscar-like. It's not traditional win. So yeah, without a doubt, Her is one of the best films of the year and is a great choice by the Academy. Next on that list of most deserving of films is the film Gravity. Now Gravity is probably the only film on this list that is a blockbuster. It's special effects heavy, it's a thriller, it's exciting, it earned tons of money at the box office, and yet at the same time here it is at the end of the award season and it's gained all sorts of recognition. That's in large part because of its director, whose name I will always fail to pronounce, and so I won't do him the disservice of that. But he's responsible for films such as Children of Men, which is equally wonderful. Now, Gravity works because it is that exciting thrill ride. It is a film where special effects are not the master of the film, but the tool of the story maker. You also have a wonderful story that is about Sandra Bullock's character surviving through some of the most adverse conditions and her constant need to find something to survive for. George Clooney is always good with his roguish charm. It's a wonderful film. It may make you never want to go into space, but it's exciting. It's visually breathtaking. Has a wonderful soundtrack. It deserves to be there, clearly. Next on the films deserving to be there list, it seems a bit weird to say that, but you know what I'm trying to say, 12 Years a Slave. It's a shame that this film has received that kind of nasty, cynical backlash of being just a film about slavery. That it's somehow a shoe-in for the Oscar because it's about slavery, that's the topic. Because just to dismiss it as another film about slavery is to miss the brilliance of Stephen McQueen's filmmaking. If you haven't ever seen Shame, the film with Michael Fassbender as a sex addict, you know you're missing out on something, and is a truly difficult film to watch, but a film that is confronting and rewarding for someone who persists with it. And I think the same can be said of 12 Years a Slave. Maybe not in some ways as an uncomfortable topic or a more obvious topic, but 12 Years a Slave isn't simply about a man's journey into slavery. It isn't just simply a film about brutality. It's a film about survival. It's a film about how people ignore slavery, how people accept it, how people struggle with it. It's about those kind of reactions that you see from a number of different characters. Sure, Michael Fassbender plays that typical evil slave owner, but then there's characters like Benedict Cumberbatch, who is conflicted. He knows he's entitled to own slaves, and he tries to treat them well, but they're still slaves. And then, of course, there's Brad Pitt's cameo, where a man who just can't reconcile that because perhaps he's from Canada. But that's kind of the interesting part of this film. It also doesn't flaunt its violence. It's kind of a weird film in that there are scenes that are just horrific, but they're not necessarily out and out violence. There's a scene where the lead actor, the main character, I always forget his name, he's got two names in it, but Solomon, that's it, I cheated on IMDb, it's right in front of me. Solomon is being hung. Now, the hanging is interrupted, but he's left there to hang on his tiptoes. And he's there all day, and at first it's silent and there's the sound of crickets and all that kind of stuff, that sound of heat and sweat and humidity, but then life returns and things go on normally around him, and it's horrible what's happening as he struggles to keep his neck above the noose. But it's also horrible to watch these people as they move about their business. Then there's a scene with a flogging. And unlike, say, The Passion of the Christ, where it's just sheer brutality, we watch the reactions, we see the mist of blood, and it's not until after the flogging is done do we see the result. Somehow that's more haunting and more powerful. Absolutely great cast of almost unknowns that drive the story forward. But there's also this, I guess, outlying bunch of celebrity performances that have these quite humble roles. It's an important film, and it's a great film for discussion. Next up on the list, and surely deserving to be there, is The Dallas Buyers Club. Most people will straight away see the performance of Matthew McConaughey as Ron. He's this cowboy who has HIV and is given a death sentence. 30 days to live. This is the height of the AIDS crisis in the 80s, and there is no known cure. A man not satisfied to simply go quietly into the night, he looks for a cure and procures some by illegal means. And eventually, well, not a cure, but a thing to treat the disease. And eventually starts making $1 out of it. What's fascinating is that it's an interesting story about the AIDS crisis and medicine and FDA approval and things like that. It's this fascinating story about that. It's also a story about an entrepreneur making money, but it's also a story filled with interesting characters. Ron is very much a homophobic redneck type character, and yet his best friend soon becomes a transvestite, played brilliantly by Jared Leto, who like, yeah, it's just wonderful in a brave and challenging performance. It's that rare thing where it's a true story that is both an interesting story filled with interesting characters rather than just being one or the other. It also is fascinating about the plight of how drugs are approved and things like that. But like I said, it will probably be remembered for its performances, which are exceptional. And if we're going to talk about predictions, I would say Matthew McConaughey is probably a shoo-in for this award, for the Best Actor award. But yeah, the Dallas Buyers Club's definitely worth a look. Okay, we're starting to get into those films which are, I don't know, they're good films, but they're not films I necessarily would have put on that list. Let me just start with the one that's kind of in the middle for me, and that's Captain Phillips. Now, it wouldn't be an Oscar year without something to do with Tom Hanks, you know, and there's potentially 2 films that he could have been nominated, this and Saving Mr. Banks. But Captain Phillips is the one up there for recognition. Now, again, this is this type of film that I was talking about in the Dallas Buyers Club, but it's an interesting story more than it's filled with interesting characters. Captain Phillips is a man taken hostage by Somali pirates, and he's very much an everyday Joe, you know, just lives his life, captains a ship, is brave when he needs to be brave, is driven by that survival mechanism. The plight of the Somali pirates is probably one of the most interesting things on display here, though. This sense of which they can't earn the kind of money that they see on these big ships that go past. It's a really interesting film where on some level there is no bad guy. On some level there's only this plight of these people driven into this. It's really, really exciting film, even though you can imagine what the end result is, we probably wouldn't have a story if it ended in tragedy. But it's still exciting. You still care what happens to Captain Phillips, but more importantly, you care about what happens to particularly the main Somali pirate. The other interesting thing is that this has this perfect Tom Hanks moment. It actually happens after he's rescued, so I guess that's spoilers. But the shock of it all just overwhelms him, and this sense of disorientation, of post-traumatic stress just confuses him, and it's just like a 2-minute performance, and in that 2 minutes you could see Tom Hanks would be worthy of getting one of his umpteenth Oscar nods. At the end of the day, though, you might forget Captain Phillips. It won't shatter your world, it won't change your way of thinking, it doesn't necessarily move you to new places. It's a good film, potentially not a Best Picture film. Okay, so now we get to the things where I didn't like them quite as much as the Academy did. Let me just preface by saying that these are good films. That every film that I kind of dismiss a little bit is a good film. I'm not retracting my statement that they don't deserve to be a Best Picture, but they're good films. The first of this list that I would happily put off the Best Picture is the Wolf of Wall Street. Now, while I had issues with Captain Phillips, I'm okay with it being on the Best Picture list. The Wolf of Wall Street is another story altogether. We have had films about greed, we've had films about Wall Street, we've had films about Leonardo DiCaprio being rich, even this year. And this is exactly that. This is a film where drug taking and orgies and fast living are fun. Martin Scorsese is a brilliant filmmaker, and he makes these things look fun, and the opulence and the excitement, and like Goodfellas or other films, there's always that fall from the high, but it's never quite as convincing as it has been before. The problem with The Wolf of Wall Street is that white-collar crime is often overlooked as it's not as bad as murdering somebody or something awful like that. Yet every time you see Leonardo DiCaprio's character make a phone call, or Jonah Hill or whoever, to sell something, to rip someone off, someone's life is ruined. The film never boldly goes into that direction of going, who are the victims of Wall Street? Who are the victims of this wolf? Now, it's a well-made film, it's exciting to watch, it's darkly funny in parts, but it's overly long. It kind of repeats itself on a number of different occasions, and it's undecided whether you're meant to like its hero or not. And I don't think that's the fault of the audience. I think it's the fault of the film. The film that I feel very uncomfortable with being on this list is American Hustle. It strikes me as that kind of film that wants to be on the Oscar list. It gets A-list casts and you know, names that you have a bit of credibility and tries to create a story about a heist. It involves politicians, it involves the cynicism and the glory days of the 70s. It is really well acted, particularly by Christian Bale, who goes from tough guy Batman to kind of a weak, conniving type character. You've got Amy Adams, who is always kind of electric. Jennifer Lawrence, everyone talks about J-Law. Of course, she's in this. And then you got Bradley Cooper, who really is just mimicking his Silver Linings playbook, if you get what I mean. Like I said, it's a well-made film. It's exciting. It's easy to watch, but it's hard to know again what it's trying to say. This is a film about corruption. It's a film that's deeply cynical. Like I said, Christian Bale's wonderful. Amy Adams, brilliant. And their relationship is probably the heart of the film, but that's the problem, is that that's meant to be the driving force behind the decisions that are being made. You know, this love between Amy Adams and Christian Bale, but we're never quite convinced. We never like them enough. It's an interesting story. Like I said, there's lots of corruptions, lots of twists and turns. There's a De Niro cameo, but I think that this feels rushed, maybe like it wasn't worked out properly. David O. Russell has kind of had a bit of a resurgence the last few years. You know, he's had The Fighter, he's had Silver Lining Playbook, and now this in the award contention category. But both The Fighter and Silver Lining Playbook had heart, had this resonance where the audience could connect with them quite easily. But this doesn't. American Hustle is a cold experience. It might be well made, it might have wonderful 70s dancing and haircuts in it, but what it's actually trying to say means that it doesn't deserve to be on this Best Picture list. Now, there's two films, admittedly, that I haven't seen on this list, so forgive me. This is more to do with the fact that I'm Australian and that Australia doesn't like to play films that are Oscar-worthy in any sort of time order. But let me just say that Philomena and Nebraska could be great films, but I haven't seen it. Okay, so when we get to this list of Best Pictures, they're not on it. I haven't seen it. And that doesn't mean they're disqualified, it just means they don't make my list. So, let's do this, okay? Here's a picture of the top 9 Oscar films, okay? And let's edit them out, the ones that I think don't deserve to be there, okay? Alright, hold that, and then in a few moments after my Best Picture prediction, who will win the award? We will start filling that list with some more deserving candidates.